Hey everybody, Colin from Track Attack here. We're back at the Safe Auto Vault for another paddock review. Today we're going to be reviewing the Japanese car that can do it all. Let's open the vault and check it out. Here we are with the 2020 Honda Civic Type R. This thing truly is the jack of all trades. It's the car that can do it all. Or is it? Well, to find out today, we're going to have our guest host, Mike. Come on in, Mike.
Thanks, Colin. I'm so happy to be here. It's always been my dream to review cars, so I'm really pumped. The 2020 Honda Civic Type R, I feel like is a car they built just to embarrass everybody. You, your parents, your friends and coworkers, but most importantly, your opposition at the track. Bang!
Ah, I see what you did there. So you know what, you're right. Actually, this car actually does all those things. It embarrasses people, especially the styling. We'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, let's start off with the performance. We obviously know my race car driving background. You're the same, obviously you have a big background in racing as well. So yes, this car, as we know, as race car drivers, has a lot to offer because for the price point, it delivers phenomenal performance, right? Like you go to the racetrack with this thing, even stock form, and you can keep up to some pretty cool stuff if you're a good driver.
Well, absolutely. I haven't had a chance to drive it yet, but I would definitely look forward to it after everything that I've researched about this car. Absolutely. So I would definitely be chomping at the bit for that opportunity.
It is. It's a fantastic car. You definitely need to drive it at some point soon. I'm sure we can help you get in that position. That being said, let's start walking around the car and start talking about some of the embarrassing things and maybe not so embarrassing things about it.
It's a point of view. Well, let's take a look.
So Mike, here at the front of the car, there's some very, let's say, controversial styling. Some people love it, some people don't. It does have that very, you know, Gundam Wing, I don't know, Transformers sort of Japanese looking front end.
Transform and roll out.
I personally do like it. I think it definitely adds a lot of character to the car.
I love it. I think it's obvious that Honda put a ton of effort into the aerodynamics of this car.
Yep.
The under tray is mostly flat bottom pieces with a Venturi duct to cool critical components. Most of these ducts are real. This is 13% bigger this year to cool the radiator. Yep. This cools the intercooler.
Which is interesting because the car needed it from previous years because they were having some cooling issues on track. Yeah. So to your point, Honda engineers did listen and they improved the car by adding this extra airflow. And like you said, they do have a lot of functional aero bits. Yeah. Well, not all functional though. They're not all functional vents, are they?
No, there's one that's not.
Let's go look at that one, shall we?
All right.
So as we know, here on the side of the car here, now to be a vent, technically doesn't that mean it like needs to flow air and not be closed off?
I mean, technically it's sealed off from the wheel well, but a fake vent is just a state of mind. If you've got the Dremel and the guts to make it a real vent, you can just cut it open.
Now yes, this is a fake vent, but again, to your point, Mike.
Temporary fake vent.
Yes, temporary, sorry. Pro tip of the day. But then don't forget, there still is a lot of functional aero about this car, such as?
I was really impressed with the vortex generators on the roof. This channels air onto the wing more efficiently, and this wing actually makes quite a bit of downforce. It makes 30 kilograms of downforce at 200 kilometers an hour, and you can see that the chord of this wing is not actually that wide. So for it to do that, it has to be very efficient. So the engineers put a ton of work in channeling air onto that wing efficiently, and for that I was very impressed.
But then again though, Honda engineers always have been very, very good at being efficient with their designs in terms of the practicality. Yeah. Like the Type R lineage itself lends to that fact. Think of how any Type R car in history has always punched way above its weight class in terms of performance.
Now definitely I have a lot of respect for the Type R. I come from a Nissan Z, and if you have a Nissan Z up on a hoist, it is not a flat bottom, it is a very lumpy bottom, and there is absolutely no work into the aerodynamics of the Z, at least the generation that I owned. They were proud that it was a zero lift car. So that we've come this far that you can purchase one of these off the showroom floor with downforce is very impressive.
That is, absolutely. Now, speaking of Honda engineering, one thing that I think you were not super impressed with was the engineer's choice of wheels.
No, I thought that the wheels and tires were a bit showboat. It comes with 20-inch wheels on it. They look super skinny. Obviously 18s fit on it because this owner has put winter tires on it. The first thing I would do if I owned this car would do the same thing. I'd put some wider wheels and tires on it, and I'd probably swap in some 18s.
And it's interesting you mentioned that, because when you see a lot of guys tracking these cars, that's what most owners tend to do for track purposes, exactly that. Wider wheels, good square setup sort of thing, and they go with a smaller, usually lighter wheel. Yep. But to that point, you have a bit of a bigger sidewall, which for racing, sometimes you need, because with a tire on the stock wheel, it looks like you took a marker and drew around the edge of the rim. It's not ideal for racing purposes. Looks cool for the guys who like that look, that is.
Yeah, they're rubber band tires, and I guarantee you, that first apex curb, you're gonna wish you never hit it.
Absolutely. Okay, so now we've moved to the back of the car, and this is interesting because as crazy boy racer look as this car is, the back is the busiest part of the car. Like there's vents, there's venturi ducts, there's flaps, there's wings on wings, like there's a lot going on the back here. And even the exhaust tips, there's 3 of them. Why is there not 1, 2, 4? Why is there 3?
I don't know, it's certainly obnoxious and it's very loud, and people with good taste would say it's probably too much for them. The 3-tip exhaust is mostly for auditory tuning, and if I owned this car, the first thing I would do would go with the lightweight titanium. I don't care about the auditory tuning. I don't care what noise it makes. I just want the car to be as light as possible. So the first thing, well, after the wheels and tires, the next thing I'd be doing would be ditching that exhaust.
I agree. Even just for me to look, I don't like this 3-tip thing. And if you look, 2 of the tips are even bigger than the other one. Like, it just looks awkward. It looks like a mishmash. Yeah. I don't like it personally. Some people do. That's cool. I don't. Yeah, it's too much boy racer for me again.
Yeah. I don't care how it looks, really. I'm not really an aesthetics or an artist type person. I just want to know how things work. Yes. And I was reading that they did that so that it sounded good at low RPM and high RPM. And the center, I believe, actually shuts off at high RPM to avoid a booming sound. But yes, it's not for me.
I agree, and I'm the same boat for different reasons, though. So now, again, being jack of all trades, yes, we're talking about the performance of it, but it does have some very practical elements. While we're here at the back, let's actually talk about the rear. This is something you'll like, Mike, because
show me, because I haven't seen it before.
Let's check it out. So you will like this part of it because there is a ton of space in the back of this. Nice big wide opening as well, so very easy to get, say, I don't know, some spare track tires in there.
Yeah, maybe it's okay. After we gut this out to make it lighter, so much more stuff's going to fit in there.
That is true. You could fit more, but nonetheless, being a Honda Civic has to be practical, right? Type R, but still is a Honda Civic. And this makes it very appealing to the mass markets because
I guess you got to sell to people to make it affordable.
That's it. Because think about this, you can put your groceries in the back, you put your dog, whatever stuff you need to carry around, so it's practical, but you take it out, you go to the racetrack, and you embarrass those other cars we talked about. So again, this still keeps it in that vein where it's still a Honda Civic. It's still a good car, not just a race car.
I guess.
Right. So let's check out the interior and see if that follows same suit with this.
All right.
And of course, the one thing I love about this car is this beautiful boost blue paint. A very interesting option for this year of the Type R. So my favorite color for this car, by the way.
I might pick the same.
It kind of clashes with the red interior, but hey, that's fine. So getting into this interior here, it's actually really nice. It's Honda Civic. It's comfortable. It's spacious. It's all the controls are well laid out in typical Honda fashion. Of course, I like in Type R fashion because the Type R guys, they love having the exclusivity of having a Type R, and the badge here with the numbered plaque certainly reminds you you're driving that special Type R, and you get that Type R experience. I think it's kind of crazy because at the end of the day, it's still a Honda Civic to me. It's just a faster one, but hey, whatever, to each their own, right? But other cool thing about this I like, of course, it's a 6-speed manual because let's face it, in a modern car, where do you get that these days? So far and few between.
I was reading that it actually has an auto rev match feature.
It does.
Which disappointed me. I think that my advice would be to disable it, do it yourself, but I understand they have to sell this to a large number of people in order to make it affordable, so
exactly.
It is what it is.
100%. And I agree with you because again, as a fellow, race car driver-esque person, I drive lots of cars with the auto blip feature. I always turn them off in my track reviews because I want to drive the car. I don't want the car to drive for me. That being said, cool feature. I've tried them. Obviously, it's really neat. It rev matches perfectly every time. It's really cool tech for sure. It's fun to play with. But yes, once you do it once just to try it out and say it's cool, don't want to use it, right? Speaking of which, in blipping throttles, let's actually turn this one on and blip the throttle a little bit, because let's face it, one of my favorite things about Type R motors of the past anyway is the sound. You know, let's face it, a Type R motor, you know, revving to redline under load, there's not a lot of stuff out there that sounds that good, right? This, however, is a turbo motor. It's not naturally aspirated anymore, and as we know, that tends to kill the sound effects a bit. So let's turn this one on, rev it up, and let's see if this actually still has any good Type R sounds or not, shall we?
Sure.
And of course, because this host is very short, we're gonna have to adjust the seat. It's got a little bit of growl to it. That's nice. Let's rev it a little bit here. You can actually hear a little bit of the whooshing from the turbo.
The fact that it's a turbo K20 makes it extremely tunable.
Yes, that is true. In terms of performance potential, it certainly surpasses the old Type R motors by, you know, like a country mile. I would say just hearing the exhaust note, it certainly doesn't have that same character that the old Type Rs have. It's got a bit of a sound to it, it's not bad. But yes, to your point, performance tuning potential, this thing, you can do a lot with this. I mean, there's guys running 400 horsepower in these easily, and still pretty reliably too. That's the beauty of it.
You swap out a couple parts and you're there.
Absolutely, right? And the good thing is it's got a good chassis behind it that'll manage that power well, and it does the job quite well. I agree, you'll need some tire upgrades to probably do that efficiently.
Yeah.
But otherwise, you know, it's an interesting car because, like I said, it's still a Honda Civic, yet it delivers the performance, and the tuning capability is also there as well. So it really is a car with so many different facets. It's quite an interesting package, and it really makes me, you know, tip my hat to the Honda engineers. They were able to do all this.
They did a great job. One thing I was disappointed to read about, the infotainment system actually pipes in fake engine tones into the Type R's interior. And for a car of the Type R's lineage, that's almost unforgivable.
You know what? I agree 100%. But the problem is most new cars do that, right? That's the problem. Like the new Mercedes do that. I mean, you name it, everything does it, right? Like it's crazy.
They've got to appeal to a broad audience, and the average person doesn't care. So the Honda engineers, when they set all of their lap records in Europe, stripped out the infotainment system, and they stripped out the back seat. So we're on the same page as them.
Exactly. Now, speaking of the interior, let's jump back that for a second. Again, this car's a certain price point, let's face it. This isn't a supercar. You know, it's like in Canada, you know, between $40,000 $50,000 price tag. And the interior kind of shows that, in my opinion, where it's got some nice features. Like it's got a nice wheel, it's got some Alcantara, the shifter's nice, got a nice little metal ball, and you know, there's some nice trim pieces that kind of dress it up, I guess you could say. But at the same time, you know, they got this like fake plasticky carbon fiber trim piece here. If you ever look in the back of the car too, by the way, there's some really bad fake carbon fiber. Like, you're kind of reminded this is definitely not an upscale market car, like, I mean, with that.
That's 90% of the fun of the car. The fact that you can take this car, you can put 3 GoPros on it, turn them on, go out on the track and get point buys from cars that cost 3 times as much. That is worth the laughs. That is worth the price of admission, and that is worth tolerating cheaper, low-rent materials on the inside. Yep. The Alcantara steering wheel is nice. Mike's Pro Racing tip number 2, I would buy 2 of them. Your racing gloves are going to tear that up. So get your first one for when you drive the car and your second one for when you sell the car, because you're going to beat on this car for sure, and you don't want that wheel to look like you've been beating on it when you want to sell it. That's
very true, actually. A good point. And speaking of good Alcantara bits in this car is, well, the seats, right? Like, I have to admit, that is one thing that is actually quite good for this price point. These are good seats. They're very comfortable. I find them bolstered pretty well for a street seat, of course, not a race seat. But you know, and the stitching and the Type R logos and everything, and so even get the pass-throughs here, you know, for the safety harnesses. Like, it's actually a really nice seat, I think. They're quite comfortable. So again, for this price point, I think that is definitely a plus for the Type R interior, which is interesting because this car has a lot of pluses and minuses in the interior. There's some things I love, and there's some things where I'm like, ew, I don't like. It's still very base model Honda Civic looking, right?
Yeah.
And that's interesting. So I don't know. It's a really mixed bag, which is kind of what this car's about anyway. Okay, so let's check this beauty out here.
Turbo K20.
Find the hole here, there we go. Okay, perfect. So we have the K20C, of course, as the heart of this beast. Now, this actually is a really interesting engine. 2-liter, 4-cylinder turbo, makes just over 300 horsepower, makes almost 300 pound-feet of torque. Considering this is a front-wheel drive platform, that's actually a fair bit of power.
Yeah, you can run into real problems with torque steer with a car with that much power on front wheel drive, but I've heard that they've mitigated that quite well.
They actually have. Again, I've had a lot of experience driving everything from stock ones to modified ones on track. And that was actually one of the biggest things that impressed me with this car, was how well this thing actually puts the power down, first of all, like just even the straight lines, but then the way you can really exit a corner and again, use the throttle to pull you out without, again, running into torque steer, but also just not affecting the dynamic of the car at all. Like you drive this very much like a rear-wheel drive in terms of your driving style, which is surprising because normally you can't with a front-wheel drive car, unless it's some highly tuned race car, of course.
Yeah, it's, you know, if I was to sit in this car, I would definitely be doing things a little bit different. I'd be getting all my braking done in a straight line. And then to use this power, I'd be trying to pick up that throttle as soon as possible.
Absolutely. And to your point, you kind of can with this car. It's interesting because most front wheel drives, you kind of don't. The other interesting thing about this engine is we both know how tunable it is.
Yeah.
And that makes it really cool because traditionally Type R motors, you can make some okay jam for an NA, but let's face it, they were fast because they were light and they had good handling dynamics.
Yeah.
This car isn't super light anymore, but it still has phenomenal handling dynamics. But now you can make some real power with these motors.
Yeah, as long as you can control that power, you are going to be dominant, that's for sure.
My only gripe with that though is, again, this probably goes back to the whole Civic base model commuter car part, and it's a very little nitpicky thing, but this is supposed to be, the performance Type R model, and yet as soon as you pop the hood, you see a thing here that says Earth Dreams Technology that just looks so eco-blue friendly to me. It just doesn't scream performance.
I don't know.
It bugs me.
It could be from space.
It might be. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's space engineering, and that's why it's fast. Yeah, that could be it. So again, it's a great car. It does everything. But I think in conclusion, the big question is, this is a very expensive Civic. We have to talk about that for a second, okay? So again, this is not a base model. It's a Type R. Sure, it's going to cost more money, but let's face it, this is like $50,000 Canadian, basically.
That's a lot of money.
For Honda Civic.
Yeah.
It's a Civic. Would you buy one, Mike, for that kind of money? That's the question I want to ask you.
Flat out no. But if it was quantified and if I was restricted into like, I needed a new car, I wanted something with warranty, I wanted something that I could both drive on the street in summer and winter, but also build into a track weapon for the weekends, then it might fit the bill 100%. So me being me, no, but I could definitely see why someone would.
Absolutely. I think it's the right car for the right buyer. Again, like you said, if it's the all-around car, great. For me, would I buy this car for $50,000? If I needed an all-around everything car, I would strongly consider it, but I think there might be some other cars I possibly would choose before this. So overall, I have to say, I think it's a pass on me. I don't think I would spend $50,000 of my hard-earned money on a Honda Civic. I can't. I just can't.
The Honda Civic was sort of, when I was coming up in the car scene in the 90s and the 2000s, Civic was always the punchline to the import versus domestic joke. Yes. But if you love imports and if you love Hondas, this thing is not a joke anymore.
Thank you so much for watching, guys. Really hope you enjoyed this episode on the Boost Blue Honda Civic Type R. And of course, as always, make sure you like and subscribe so you're not going to miss all the fun content we have coming down the pipeline. And as always, make sure you comment. We want to know what you think about this car. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Do you own it? What's up? And of course, let us know what you thought about Mike as our special co-host for the day. We want your input so we know if you want to see more of Mike and his crazy race car background and knowledge, or maybe you just want to see more of him driving a base model Civic on the track to punish him. Let us know.
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciated coming out. Reviewing cars has been like a dream of mine, so really, I've already lived it. Thanks. Vote for me because I want to rip this car. I think that it'll be fun. We'll see you next time.
Cool. And on that note, guys, we'll see you at the track.